Hope that you are having a good day so far. So, today we'll be doing our grade 7 English lesson on verbs. So, we will be doing our grade 7 English lesson on verbs. And before we start with our lesson on verbs, you're going to log into aplusstudents.ca. Once you've logged into aplusstudents.ca with your username as well as your password, and then you're going to select the subject of language arts and then grade 7. Once we've selected grade 7, and then we're going to scroll down up until we get to the chapter of irregular verbs. Irregular verbs. And we're going to actually verbs, right? And today's lesson, we're going to do irregular verbs, irregular past tense verbs. So we're basically going to see what's the difference between irregular verbs today and then during the course of our sessions. And then we will basically differentiate between regular verbs, irregular verbs, progressive verbs, perfect verbs, right? But today we are doing irregular verbs. So our chapter is verbs. Our subject is English language arts, grade 7. And our lesson is going to be irregular past tense. Right? So we're going to be talking about the verbs, but the irregular past tense verbs, right? And we are doing our tutorial lesson on aplusstudents.ca. So we're doing our tutorial lesson on aplusstudents.ca. So basically, when it comes to verbs, right, and irregular verbs to be specific, then most verbs are regular in the past tense, right? And when we say most verbs are regular, then we mean in the sense of it ends with ed or it just ends with d. So if you maybe if you say, if you write the word watched, right? So now I watched something, but in the past I watched something. Then we just add ed to it, right? To show the verb is in the past tense. So we call those regular verbs, right? So regular verbs, it means that you follow a rule where you maybe add ed or you just add d. So you add a d if your verb already ends with an e, right? Then we just add a d to get the past tense form of the verb. But then we have some of our verbs, but then we get some verbs, right, that are irregular in the past tense. And this means that we do not follow any rules at all. Instead, you must just remember what the past tense form of that verb is, right? Which means that if your verb is in the present tense, maybe swear, for example, then you need to remember that swear in the past tense is swore, right? For example, Louis, here it says Louise or Louis did his homework, right? And basically, did is the irregular past tense form of do, which means that in the present, Louis does his homework, right? But in the past, he did his homework. It's the same as I was saying earlier on about swear, but in the past tense, it's swore because it's irregular past tense. So it's irregular. So which means that when it comes to the irregular past tense verb, you're just going to have to remember what the past tense form of the verb is because it does not follow any specific rules, right? Which means that any rules, which means that you are just going to have to remember what the irregular past tense verb is. All right, so now we're going to go on to aplusstudents.ca and we're going to do a tutorial lesson on verbs. And the lesson that we're going to be focusing on is irregular past tense. So it says complete the sentence with the verb in the past tense. So we need to complete the sentence with the verb in the past tense. And before we do so, remember we made an example, we already spoke about verbs and the difference between irregular verbs as well as irregular past tense verbs. All right. So now it says even though the gash on Nathan's arm a fair amount, it turned out to be relatively minor injuries. So we need to choose one of the correct verbs. So basically, it says even though the gash on Nathan's arms, we need to actually, the correct word to put in there, even though it bled a fair amount, it turned out to be relatively a minor injury. So which means that bled is the past tense of bleed, right? So bled is the past tense of bleed. Or to bleed. So which means that if you got hurt and there's like it's bleeding in your arm or wherever, right? In the past tense, we can say that your arm bled. So to bleed is bled. And then the archaeologists, right, to the idea that an ancient civilization was buried nearby, and he was determined to unearth evidence to support his belief. So it says that the archaeologist, right, it's like he is clinging to the idea, right? So which means that we can say the archaeologist clung to the idea. Because if you are clinging, it's like holding on to an idea. It's like clinging is to hold on. Then we can say he clung to the idea. that an ancient civilization was buried nearby, and he was determined to unearth evidence to support his disbelief. So clung is the past tense. So to cling, it's in the present tense, and clung is in the past tense. So here it says, it took determination and hard work, but Dwayne finally repaid his debt. Say finally repaid his debt and started saving money for a house. So repaid is the verb in the past tense, right? But repaid, the present tense form of repaid is to repay. So basically, to repay is in the present tense. And if you repaid it back, then that is the irregular past tense form. So we said it's repaid. All right, so now let's go up. Let's first go to next before we go to our test. So just remember that irregular past tense verbs or irregular past tense, right? It does not follow any rules, meaning we do not follow rules like it ending in ed or ending in d, right? Which means that you need to remember what the verb is. So here it also says the little deer, meaning it's an animal, looked at the cougar for one brief moment, trembling, and then swiftly across to the field. So the little deer looked at the cougar for one brief moment, trembling. And then, if you want to run away, and another way for running away is to flee. It's to flee. So we don't say flee and flied, right? So to flee, and we basically say fled. So we say fled. And fled is our past tense form, or our irregular past tense form of the word to flee. So fled is the past tense of to flee. Miss Harvey was pleased when her youngest son set the table without being asked and then volunteered to help clean up after dinner. So Miss Harvey was pleased when her youngest son, when he set the table. So when he set the table without being asked and then volunteered to help clean up after dinner. So set is the same, almost like saying it in the past tense, but we just add to set in the present tense, for example. So set and to set is in the present tense, right? Then we go to the next one. It says complete the sentence with the correct verb in the past tense, right? I want my brother how to make a bird house. So I want my brother to make a bird house. So basically, if you teach someone, right, to teach someone, the regular past tense verb of to teach someone is I taught. So I taught my brother how to make a bird house, right? Which means that it's to teach someone. So taught, and taught is the past tense form of the verb teach. So to teach, the past tense verb is basically taught. All right, now let's go to our test. So we need to complete the sentence with the verb in the past tense, right? And remember, we are using irregular past tense. The blanket Pamela, do we say Pamela bought or Pamela buy, should keep her warm? So the blanket Pamela bought or Pamela buy should keep her warm. So the blanket Pamela bought or Pamela buy should keep her warm. So if we want to make mention of it in the past tense, we can say that the blanket Pamela bought, she should keep her warm, should keep her warm. And bought is the irregular past tense form. It took determination and hard work, but Dwayne finally, is it repay or repaid his debt and started saving money for a house? So do we say repay or repaid? So we can say to repay, that he finally repaid his debt. He repaid his debt. And repaid is correct. Do we say the ostrich thrust or the ostrich thrusts its neck out as it turned to see what sort of creature had just entered the pen? So the ostrich thrust or thrusts its neck out as it turned to see what sort of creature had just entered the pen. So which one is the correct one? So we can say the ostrich thrusts its neck out as it turned to see what sort of creature had just entered the pen. Oh, so it's basically just thrust. It's not thrusts, right? So we basically just thrust. Robin was so annoyed by the absurd plot twist in her book or in the book that she fling or flung down on the bed, and refused to read any more. So Robin was annoyed by the absurd plot twist in the book that she flung down on the bed and refused to read anymore. So instead of she fling off the bed, but she flung on the bed. So flung it is. Imagine Chantal's despair when she tore the blouse she'd borrowed from her sister, especially after she, do we say, swore or swear to take good care of it? Did she swore or swear to take good care of it? So after, we can just say she swore to take good care of it. Remember, swear is not just where we can say you are using a foul language or foul word. Swore is where you swear, it's like you are, it's almost like you are saying that you're not going to lie. So swore to take good care of it. And Mr. Blake, do we say bring or brought a variety of fruit to the picnic, including tangerines, kiwis, and assorted melons? So, Mr. Blake, do we say bring or brought a variety of fruit to the picnic, including tangerines, kiwis, and assorted melons? So, he bring or he brought. So, if we want to make mention of it in the past tense, then we can say Mr. Blake brought a variety of fruit to the picnic, including tangerines, kiwis, and assorted melons. So he brought. And bring is in the present tense. To bring something is in the present tense. But he brought it. Brought is, it shows it's in the past tense. Irregular. I know Ethan was only trying to help, but I'm furious that he, do we say shrink my favorite shirt by putting in the dryer? or shrank my favorite shirt by putting it in the dryer. So if we choose the correct one, we can say shrank. But it says, I know Ethan was only trying to help, but I'm furious that he, can we say shrink or shrank? My favorite shirt by putting it in the dryer. So basically, it shrank. And the physician, do we say shut the door so that he could speak with his patients in confidence, or the physician shutting the door so that he could speak with his patient in confidence? So basically, the physician shut the door so that he could speak with his patients in confidence. I think shut is the same, because shutting does not sound right. Shut the door. So the little deer looked at the cougar for one moment, one brief moment, trembling, and then he swiftly fled the field. So fled swiftly across the field. Fled is correct. All right. Mr. Mercado thought he could easily resolve the company's storage problem, but as soon as we say undertake or undertook, we say undertook, he undertook the project, he realized that he was in over his head. So Mr. Mercado thought he could easily resolve the company's storage problem, but as soon as he undertook the project, he realized that he was in over his head. So undertook it is. And the barber trimmed Gabe's hair and the the clippings neatly into a dustbin and swept. So it is the barber trimmed Gabe's hair and We said swept the clippings neatly into a dustbin. And swept is correct. Which means that sweep is our present tense and swept is the past tense. So the guest conductor, do we say stride or strode to the stage? Bowed to the audience and then turned to face the orchestra. So the guest conductor to the stage, bowed to the audience, and then turned to face the orchestra. Do we say stride to the stage or strode to the stage? Let's go with strode to the stage because it's the past of stride. And then the labels on Haley's sweater, right, were irritating her skin. So she carefully, is it cut them out or cutting them out? So she carefully cut them out. It's cut and cut. Right? All right, so let's go to simple present and future tense, right? So we get simple present and future tense, or simple past, present and future tense. It says past tense verbs that will tell you about something that has already happened, right? And we usually add an ed, that is if we like have our regular verbs, to form a past tense form of the verb. And if a verb already ends in e, we just add a d. And if a verb ends in a short vowel and a singular consonant, we double the consonant by adding ed. And if a verb ends in a consonant y, we then change the y to a I and then add ed. For example, Sam changed his clothes. So Sam changed his clothes. And this basically shows it is regular because it either just adds a d, ed. And we watched the game. You see, we just add an ed, watched the game. And the audience clapped loudly. The audience clapped loudly. And then Alex qualified for the finals. which means that that word qualified, it was, the present tense of qualified is qualified. But now they said if your verb ends in a consonant Y, we change that to an IED. So qualify, just give me 1 second. So qualify is where we had qualify, so they said we need to remove the Y, which we did. We add an I before the ED. So it will then be quali, and we change the Y that is there to an I, and then we have ED. So that's qualified. All right, now let's go to our test. Did you know that a water molecule consists of 2 hydrogen atoms and 1 oxygen atom? So do we go, we say consists or consist? Let's go with consists of 2 hydrogen atoms and 1 oxygen atom. Yes. And in the forecast is calling for colder temperatures this afternoon. So the precipitation, do we say turn to snow or will turn to snow? So we then say the forecast is calling for colder temperature later this afternoon. So the precipitation, here it says we need to write it in the future tense. Then it means will turn to snow. Will turn. And now we need to complete the sentence with the future tense. Tomorrow, Mr. Davis will meet his publisher to discuss the release of an upcoming novel. So will meet is correct. All right, so that is basically the end of our lesson on verbs. And we say that we have regular and irregular verbs, right? Regular verbs are usually the verbs that ends in ed. Or if your verb ends in an e, we just add a d to it, right? However, when it comes to irregular verbs or irregular past tense verb, then it means that you just need to basically know what the, let's say, the outcome is, right? Because there's no rule that we need to follow, for example, like add ed or add a d or anything, right? You're just going to have to know the meaning or how the word changes from a, let's say, present tense form of the verb to a past tense form of the verb. All right, so grade 7, this is now the end of our lesson. Thank you very much for joining the class, and I really hope you're going to have a good day further. Goodbye.